Are you looking to improve your running routine? Do you want to know the answer to the question, how many times should I run per week? Then this video is exactly what you need. As a long-time runner and coach myself, I know firsthand how important it is to find the right balance of how often and how far to run each week in order to get fitter without risking injury. And that's why today I'm going to be sharing with you exactly how many times per week you should run, giving you all the facts so that you can maximize your workout results. Let's start with a quick table which shows you how many times you should run depending on your goals. And before I go through this, I should say that it's an oversimplistic guide, and in the remainder of the video I'll introduce some important factors to consider alongside the guidance in this table. So if your goal is to improve your general health and fitness, or you want to train for an event but you don't have much time to train, I would suggest doing 3 runs per week. Whereas if your goal is to maintain and improve your fitness for occasional races, you might want to do 4 or 5 runs per week. If your goal is to be competitive and run races regularly, you're looking at more like 5 or 6 runs per week. And if your goal is to race at elite level or be very competitive on race day, you're talking about 6 and even all the way up to 12 runs per week. So as I say, that's a really rough guide, but there is more to it than that. So let's run through some of the most important things to consider, and then you'll know exactly how many times per week you should be running. Before you decide how many times to run each week, you need to think about where your fitness is today. For example, are you an experienced runner already notching up 4 or 5 runs per week? Or are you new to the sport or returning to running after a layoff? The answers to these kinds of questions will help you determine how often you should run from today onwards. And the reason you need to get this right is because at least 50% of runners get injured each year. And if you suddenly start running too often, you'll soon become one of them. So start with how many times you're running per week right now, if at all, and then consider whether you're managing to stay injury-free with that training regime. And that should be your starting point, really. And from there, you should only increase your total weekly mileage by 5% in order to stay consistent and injury-free. In other words, you should build up the duration and frequency of your run workouts very conservatively. In many cases, if you want to add an extra run each week, you may need to start by shortening the ones that you already do so that your weekly mileage doesn't crank up too quickly. This does take patience, but it's worth it in the end. And if 5% sounds like too little, your other option is to incorporate walking into your run workouts. So you're out for longer, but without putting as much stress on your legs. What are your running goals? Are you aiming to set new personal bests, run your first marathon, or just get fit and healthy? Well, before deciding how often you should run, you need to work out what your goals are right now. And if you're looking to get fit and healthy, running 3 times per week is probably enough. The beauty of running 3 times per week is that it allows at least a day in between for your legs and body to recover. Even elite runners typically only do 3 key workouts per week, complemented by steady recovery runs. By following this schedule, you too can incorporate the important session types like intervals, long runs and tempo runs. Plus you'll have spare days for strength and conditioning workouts, which can aid your running without increasing your risk of injury. Whereas if your running goals are more ambitious, it's a good idea to gradually build up to running more than just 3 times per week. However, it is worth noting that any training regime beyond 3 runs per week is subject to the law of diminishing returns. In other words, running 6 times per week won't make you twice as fast as running 3 times. However, that's not to say you won't improve by running more often. For example, my goal at the moment is to set a marathon personal best, and I run 5 or 6 times per week. This training regime allows me to be competitive on race day and stay injury-free, and I can just about fit my training around my work and family too. I do 2 or 3 key workouts per week plus 3 steady recovery runs, and they all contribute towards my fitness and my chances of setting a new personal best. At the other end of the scale, the world's best marathon runners train 12 or more times per week, which does suggest that running more often leads to better results. And there's some truth in that, because if you're only running 3 times per week, you're unlikely to be troubling any world records. However, it's not for everyone. Some runners can cope well with high mileage, others not so much, and not everyone has the time or inclination to train so often. No matter what your running goals are, if you're a super busy person, you need to be realistic about how many times you can run each week. There's no point in setting yourself a goal of running X number of times per week if you simply don't have time for it. Either you need to cut down on your commitments or you need to train according to your availability. For busy people, 3 runs per week is probably the sweet spot, Whereas if you have more spare time and you're looking to improve at running, then gradually building up to 4, 5, or even 6 runs per week can result in slightly increased fitness gains. Not everyone is built the same way. Some runners can train every day for years and years and never get an injury, despite doing no stretching, warming up or strength work, whereas many others get injured easily no matter how carefully they train. I know of ultra runners who can regularly rack up 200 miles or 160 kilometers per week without breaking down, whereas some of us, no matter how slowly we build up, can only ever cope with a lower weekly mileage. So what kind of runner are you? Because there's no point in setting yourself the goal of running 6 times per week if you already get sore and injured from just 5 sessions. In that case, you're better off running less often and staying consistent. So listen to your body, because what's right for one runner isn't necessarily right for another. If you're a triathlete or someone who includes other endurance sports in your weekly regime, you can get run fit from slightly fewer runs per week than someone who just does running. And that's because cross training helps maintain your fitness on the days when you're not running. As a triathlete, I used to run 4 times per week, swim twice and cycle 3 times. And my running times back then were the same as they are now, even though I run 5 or 6 times per week now with no cross training. In other words, if you want to become a faster runner, doing more runs each week isn't your only option. You might also improve by adding cross training into your regime in place of additional runs. So there's no wrong or right when it comes to how many times a week you should run, because we're all different. The most appropriate number for your needs should be based on your background, goals, availability, and injury resilience, as well as any cross-training that you might throw into the mix. And if you're considering getting into running or making the most of the runs you already do, you should think about following a structured training plan. I've actually designed hundreds of running plans for every kind of runner and event type, and they all include rapid coach support for whenever you need help. So if you're interested, just click on the link on screen or in the description to learn more.